Alabama has over 160 prisoners on death row. This is part 7 of the series. Kim Van Pelt, 16 years on death row. Sandra Van Pelt, a 40-year-old mother of 3 girls from Southgate, Michigan, died in 2004. Kim Van Pelt, a 45-year-old construction worker from Tuscumbia, was found guilty of her murder. He received a death sentence for the beating and suffocation of his wife of only 2 weeks. Shortly before his new wife's naked body was discovered on a roadside outside Hamilton on November 24, 2004, he purchased a $300,000 life insurance on her. Sandra Van Pelt met her husband in an online chat forum. He is now 62 years old. David Dewayne Riley, 16 years on death row. A judge gave David Dewayne Riley Jr. the death penalty for the 2005 murder of Scott Michael Kirtley, who was 38 years old. Kirtley perished during a robbery at Florence's daddy's package store. He was shot to death. Defense arguments that Riley didn't intend to murder the man were rejected by the jury. Riley remained emotionless as a Lauderdale County Circuit Judge Mike Jones handed down the death penalty. He had earlier expressed regret to the victim's family. On the witness stand, Kirtley's mother pleaded with the judge to impose the death sentence. Riley is now 39 years old. Bobby Phillips, 16 years on death row. Following their escape from the Covington County Jail on November 4, 2002, Phillips was found guilty of a number of crimes that he committed alongside Oscar Roy Doster. The murder of Paul LeMaster by gunfire was the most heinous of these transgressions. A 12-0 jury verdict resulted in the death sentence for Phillips, who admitted to being the triggerman in that killing, and was found guilty of 3 counts of capital murder. He is now 60 years old. Randy Lamont Lewis, 16 years on death row. Taurus Frost requested a ride from his girlfriend Von Trichessa Davis on March 28, 2006, so they could meet Randy Lamont Lewis. Davis brought her 2 little children who were 2 and 3 years old. Lewis, however, shot Frost point-blank in the head as Davis was being forced into another car with 2 men. When Davis attempted to flee, Lewis ran over her. He abandoned Davis's car behind an empty Ansley home. The following morning, when a neighbor reported a suspicious vehicle, the 2 kids who had spent the night in the locked car with Frost's body in the front seat were discovered. Lewis is now 37 years old. Anthony Lee Stanley, 16 years on death row. Anthony Lee Stanley was sentenced for the 2005 death of Henry Earl Smith at the Colbert County Courthouse in Tuscumbia. Stanley was given a life sentence by the jury, but that verdict was reversed in a case that many consider to be one of the most violent ever in that county. Anthony Stanley was convicted of capital murder. Smith was invited to Stanley and Shelley's flat in Tuscumbia in June 2005, but the couple had the intention of robbing him. Smith was hit with a bat and stabbed more than 30 times. Shelley Stanley initially faced a charge of capital murder but accepted a plea agreement. She received a life in prison sentence instead. Anthony Stanley is now 57 years old. Jamie Ray Mills, 16 years on death row. On June 24, 2004, Mills was found guilty of the robbery and murder of Floyd and Vera Hill. The Hill family lived on County Road 54 in Gwynn, and according to court documents, Mills and his common-law spouse, Joanne Mills, traveled there with the intention of robbing the Hill family. Her 87-year-old husband of 55 years was taking care of Mrs. Hill, who was 72 and in terrible condition. In connection with the crime, Joanne Mills is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Jamie Ray Mills is now 50 years old. Roderick Bird, 16 years on death row. In the shooting deaths of Kim Olney, 28 years old, John Aylesworth, 42 years old, and Dorothy Smith, 58 years old, on November 24, 2005 at the Birmingham Airport Inn, Bird was found guilty. All 3 were executed style shot. Bird said on the witness stand that Brendan Mitchell, a co-defendant, killed all 3 victims. However, according to the prosecution, Bird shot Aylesworth and Mitchell killed Olney and Smith. Mitchell received a death sentence as well. Bird is now 40 years old. Brent Edward Martin, 16 years on death row. Martin was found guilty of the murders of Daryl Maurice Carillo and Johnny Randolph III. In the past, he was given 2 consecutive life sentences for escaping from the Russell County prison and attempting to kill a guard. The gun that was in Martin's possession at the time of his arrest, according to evidence provided by the state, is where the bullet that killed Joni was fired. However, testimony revealed that the bullet's caliber matched that of Martin's rifle. The bullet that was extracted from Carillo was too extensively damaged to tell whether it has been shot directly from Martin's gun. In addition, the shoes Martin was wearing when he was caught matched a footprint discovered close to the bodies of Joni and Carillo. He is now 51 years old. Michael Wayne Reynolds, 16 years on death row. At the Martins' home on Tidmore Bend Road on May 25, 2003, Chuck Martin, 38 years old, his wife Melinda, 31 years old, and their 8-year-old daughter Savannah were all murdered. Reynolds was found guilty of their deaths. He reportedly visited the Martin residence to obtain cash. Chuck Martin, who suffered 11 stabbed wounds, was involved in a struggle in the kitchen, according to forensic findings. Melinda Martin resisted with her attacker before being stabbed 24 times in the bedroom, according to the forensics. Savannah Martin was stabbed 5 times because she was in the room when the murders took place, and Reynolds did not want to risk being identified. He is now 51 years old. David Philip Wilson, 15 years on death row. In Houston County, Wilson was found guilty and given a death sentence for the 2004 murder of Dewey Walker. Walker, who was 64 years old and a cancer patient, was discovered dead at his Dothan home after going several days without showing up for work. Wilson murdered Dewey Walker during a home invasion robbery. According to the authorities, Walker was strangled after being hit with an aluminum baseball bat. According to the prosecution, Wilson and 3 other people, Matthew Marsh, Catherine Corley, and Michael Ray Jackson, attempted to rob Walker of rare coins, which they claimed were buried in a wall, by attacking him in order to steal his customized van. Wilson is now 39 years old. Wakili Brown, 15 years on death row. He was given a death by lethal injection sentence by Circuit Judge Bo Hollingsworth for the murders of Cherry Jamison, 26 years old, and her mother, Dottie Jamison, who was 49 years old. Prior to his sentencing, Brown informed the court he was innocent and has continued to assert his innocence. Although several of the victims' families urged the judge to give Brown a life sentence without the possibility of parole, Talladega County District Attorney Steve Giddens expressed satisfaction with the verdict. In March 2001, Brown was found guilty of killing the women by beating them to death in the home they all shared. The women were hit in the head repeatedly with what looked like a hammer. He is now 48 years old. Mario Dion Woodward, 14 years on death row. Woodward was found guilty of killing Keith Hoots, a Montgomery police officer, during a traffic check in 2006. A judge imposed the death sentence notwithstanding a jury's 8-4 decision to sentence the defendant to life in prison. The shooting of an officer and the shot from a moving vehicle resulted in 2 capital murder charges. According to the Montgomery Advertiser's coverage of the shooting, Hoots was shot in the head, knocked to the ground, and then shot 4 more times. 2 days later, he passed away. After the incident, Woodward ran away to Georgia before being apprehended and brought back to Montgomery. He is now 50 years old. Donald Dewayne Watley, 14 years on death row. Pravinbhai Pete Patel was killed during a heist, and Donald Dewayne Watley was found guilty. Kenneth McCall, an Austell Crosby joint venture employee, went to his work site under a bridge in Mobile early on December 29, 2003, and found the victim's body lying on the ground next to the entrance gate. He dialed 911 immediately. Dr. Kathleen Estes, the state medical examiner, said that Patel had several injuries to his head, neck, chest, and shoulder before passing away from multiple traumatic injuries. The injuries to the man's face were consistent with a beating, the injuries to his neck were compatible with strangulation, and the injuries to his upper body were consistent with being run over by a car. Dr. Estes claimed that Patel's pants were around his neck. Near the victim's body, cigarette butts were discovered. One of the cigarettes had DNA that matched Watley's DNA. He is now 51 years old. Calvin McMillan, 14 years on death row. 2 years after killing a man in a Walmart parking lot and stealing his truck, a jury found McMillan guilty of murder in 2009. McMillan's attorneys explained to the jury during the sentencing phase how extremely trying his client's formative years and childhood had been. They described how McMillan endured physical and essay while growing up in an abject poverty. When he was hungry, they claimed, he would draw sandwiches on paper and consume the pictures. They also noted that before he became 18 years old, he had moved around more than 20 different foster homes. The jury in McMillan's case decided 8-4 to recommend a life sentence for the murder as an alternative to the death penalty, but the judge decided to impose the death sentence. He is now 35 years old. Kevin Andre Toles, 14 years on death row. After brutally abusing a 5-year-old boy, Kevin Andre Toles was found guilty of abandoning him and allowing his injuries to cause his death. Shalinda Glass, Toles' girlfriend, reported her automobile as stolen in Albertville in December 2006, while the little boy, Jonte, was inside. Days later, Toles was taken into custody. The plan to cover up the boys' murder turned out to involve the stolen car. In the trunk of the car, recovered at a house Toles owned, was where his body was discovered. The youngster had been severely beaten, according to an autopsy, and had the injuries received medical attention, he could still be alive today. Due to a behavior grade from school that showed a straight-mouthed rather than a smiling countenance on a report card, Toles beat the child. The jury recommended execution after Toles was found guilty in December 2009. He is now 49 years old. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.